In the affluent suburb of Pinecrest Hills, where manicured lawns and luxury cars were as common as morning joggers, Vanessa Carlyle stood out as the epitome of success. At 39, she was the top-selling real estate agent in the area, known for her dazzling smile and uncanny ability to match clients with their dream homes. Her husband, Dr. Gregory Carlyle, a respected 45-year-old cardiologist, completed their picture-perfect image. The Carlyles lived in a stunning Mediterranean-style villa, showcasing Vanessa's expert eye for property. Their social media feeds were filled with images of charity galas, exotic vacations, and intimate dinner parties, all carefully curated to portray a life of happiness and success. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were forming in the Carlyles' seemingly idyllic life. Gregory's demanding schedule at the hospital meant he was rarely home, and when he was often distracted and distant. Vanessa, always craving attention and validation, found herself increasingly lonely and unfulfilled. Enter Julian Frost, a 32-year-old aspiring actor working part-time as a barista at the local artisanal coffee shop. With his chiseled features and easy charm, Julian caught Vanessa's eye during her daily coffee runs. Their interactions, at first just friendly banter, soon evolved into lingering conversations and subtle flirtations. One rainy afternoon in April, Vanessa found herself alone with Julian in the empty coffee shop. As thunder rumbled outside, Julian confessed his attraction to her. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he told her, his voice low and intense. Vanessa, flattered and exhilarated by his attention, felt a spark she hadn't experienced in years. What began as innocent flirtation quickly spiraled into a passionate affair. Vanessa and Julian met in secret, stealing moments in parked cars, secluded parks, and eventually in the empty houses Vanessa was selling. The thrill of their forbidden relationship was intoxicating, making Vanessa feel alive in ways she hadn't in years. As spring turned to summer, Vanessa found herself taking greater risks to be with Julian. She began scheduling unnecessary open houses, using them as a cover to meet her young lover. Gregory, absorbed in his work, remained oblivious to the changes in his wife's behavior. But as with all secrets in small communities, whispers began to circulate. Vanessa's colleagues noticed her distraction and the frequency of her private showings. Her best friend and fellow realtor, Meredith Walker, grew increasingly concerned about Vanessa's reckless behavior. One evening in late July, Meredith confronted Vanessa after a particularly suspicious open house. "What's going on with you, Van?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. "People are starting to talk." Vanessa, caught off guard, attempted to deflect, but Meredith pressed on. "Is it true? Are you having an affair with that barista kid?" "Aye." Vanessa's initial denial crumbled under Meredith's scrutiny. In a moment of vulnerability, she confessed everything: her loneliness, the excitement of her affair with Julian, and her growing doubts about her marriage to Gregory. Meredith listened with a mixture of sympathy and concern, ultimately advising Vanessa to end the affair before it destroyed her life. "You have to think about what you're risking, Van," Meredith warned. "Your reputation, your career, your marriage? Is this fling really worth losing everything?" Shaken by the conversation, Vanessa resolved to end things with Julian. However, when she met him the next day to break it off, Julian's passionate pleas and declarations of love weakened her resolve. "I can't imagine my life without you," he told her, his eyes brimming with tears. "We can make this work. I know we can." Torn between her commitment to Gregory and her intense feelings for Julian, Vanessa found herself sinking deeper into the affair. She became more reckless, meeting Julian at client properties with increasing frequency. The thrill of potentially being caught only added to the excitement of their encounters. Meanwhile, Gregory began to sense that something was amiss. Vanessa's late nights and distracted behavior hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. One evening in early August, he decided to surprise her by coming home early from the hospital. He arrived to find an empty house and a half-empty bottle of wine on the kitchen counter. Concerned, Gregory called Vanessa's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He then called Meredith, who hesitated before revealing that Vanessa was conducting a private showing at a luxury property across town. Something in Meredith's voice raised Gregory's suspicions. Driven by a growing sense of unease, Gregory decided to drive to the property. As he approached the house, he noticed two cars parked in the driveway, Vanessa's sleek SUV and an unfamiliar compact car. The sight sent a chill down his spine. Gregory quietly entered the house, his heart pounding. As he moved through the dimly lit rooms, he heard muffled voices coming from upstairs. Following the sound, he found himself outside the master bedroom. What he saw when he opened the door would be forever seared into his memory. Vanessa and Julian sprang apart, their state of undress leaving no doubt about what had been transpiring. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the three stared at each other in shock. Then, with a roar of pain and fury, Gregory lunged forward. What happened next was a blur of violence and chaos. Julian, caught off guard, stumbled backward, tripping over discarded clothing. Gregory, blinded by rage, grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a nearby dresser and swung it with all his might. The vase connected with Julian's temple with a sickening crack, and he crumpled to the floor. Vanessa's scream pierced the air as she watched Julian fall, blood quickly pooling around his motionless form. Gregory, the vase still clutched in his hand, stood frozen, the full weight of his actions beginning to sink in. "What have you done?" Vanessa cried, rushing to Julian's side. But it was clear from the vacant look in Julian's eyes and the growing pool of blood that it was too late. In a matter of seconds, their illicit romance had turned into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, police sirens, and frantic questioning. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered outside the luxury home, whispering and speculating as they watched the scene unfold. Detective Laura Simmons, a seasoned investigator with the Pinecrest Hills Police Department, took charge of the case. As paramedics pronounced Julian dead at the scene, Detective Simmons began the grim task of piecing together the events that had led to this tragedy. Gregory, still in a state of shock, was taken into custody without resistance. Vanessa, barely clothed and hysterical, was separately questioned, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. In the days that followed, the scandal rocked Pinecrest Hills to its core. The story of the successful realtor, the respected doctor, and the young aspiring actor caught in a deadly love triangle became fodder for local news and gossip alike. Vanessa's real estate agency, eager to distance itself from the scandal, swiftly terminated her employment. The hospital where Gregory worked placed him on indefinite leave, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. As Detective Simmons delved deeper into the case, she uncovered a web of secrets and lies that had been simmering beneath the surface of the Carlyles' seemingly perfect life. Interviews with friends and colleagues painted a picture of a marriage that had been unraveling for years. Gregory's colleagues spoke of his increasing irritability and distraction at work, while Vanessa's friends described her growing dissatisfaction and need for validation. Julian's background check revealed a series of failed auditions and mounting debts. His roommate, reluctantly speaking to the police, suggested that Julian had seen his relationship with Vanessa as a potential ticket to a more comfortable life. He talked about her like she was his big break, the roommate told Detective Simmons, said she was going to leave her husband and set him up in style. As the investigation progressed, public opinion in Pinecrest Hills became sharply divided. Some sympathized with Gregory, viewing him as a wronged husband pushed to the brink by his wife's infidelity. Others saw Vanessa as a victim of a loveless marriage who had found solace in a younger man's arms. Julian, in death, became a tragic figure, a young dreamer whose ambitions had led him down a dangerous path. The case took an unexpected turn when Meredith Walker came forward with crucial information. Racked with guilt over her role in the events, she revealed to Detective Simmons that she had known about the affair for weeks. "I should have done more to stop it," she said tearfully. "I never imagined it would end like this." Meredith's statement provided valuable context, but it also raised questions about her own culpability. The detective now had to consider whether Meredith's silence made her an accessory to the events that unfolded. As summer turned to fall, the case against Gregory Carlyle began to take shape. The prosecution, led by the ambitious district attorney, Rachel Goodwin, charged him with second-degree murder. They argued that while the killing may not have been premeditated, Gregory's actions showed a reckless disregard for human life. The defense team, headed by the high-profile attorney James Lowell, prepared to argue that Gregory had acted in the heat of passion, a circumstance they hoped would reduce the charges to voluntary manslaughter. They planned to paint a picture of a devoted husband driven to temporary insanity by the shock of his wife's betrayal. Vanessa, caught between her guilt over the affair and her horror at its tragic outcome, retreated from public life. She moved in with her sister in a neighboring town, her days now filled with visits to her therapist and meetings with her lawyer. The woman who had once been the toast of Pinecrest Hills now couldn't show her face in public without drawing whispers and stares. As the trial date approached, tension in the community reached a fever pitch. The courthouse became a media circus, with reporters from across the country descending on Pinecrest Hills to cover what had become known as the Realtor's Revenge case. The trial of Gregory Carlyle began on a crisp October morning, the courtroom packed with spectators and media. Over the next 3 weeks, a parade of witnesses took the stand, each adding another layer to the complex tapestry of events that had led to Julian Frost's death. Vanessa's testimony was particularly grueling. Over 2 days on the stand, she laid bare the disintegration of her marriage and the evolution of her relationship with Julian. Her voice trembled as she recounted the moment Gregory had walked in on them and the horror of watching Julian fall. Under cross-examination, Lowell attempted to paint her as a manipulative adulteress whose actions had driven her husband to temporary insanity. But Vanessa held firm, accepting her part in the tragedy while insisting that nothing justified Julian's death. Gregory's time on the stand was equally intense. Against his lawyer's advice, he chose to testify, his testimony a study in contrasts, moments of apparent remorse interspersed with flashes of the anger that had led to Julian's death. He spoke of the pressure he'd been under at work, the growing distance in his marriage, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity. When describing the fight with Julian, Gregory claimed he had never intended to cause serious harm, that he had simply lost control. The prosecution called expert witnesses to testify about the force required to cause Julian's fatal injury, arguing that Gregory's actions showed a clear intent to harm. The defense countered with a psychologist who spoke about the psychological impact of discovering a spouse's infidelity, likening it to a form of acute stress disorder. As the trial neared its end, both the prosecution and defense made impassioned closing arguments. D.A. Goodwin painted Gregory as a man who had allowed his rage to overcome his reason, arguing that his actions constituted murder, regardless of the circumstances that led to them. Lowell, in turn, appealed to the jury's empathy, asking them to consider how they might react if faced with a similar situation. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. They found Gregory Carlyle guilty of voluntary manslaughter, a lesser charge than the second-degree murder the prosecution had sought. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs as the verdict was read. At the sentencing hearing a week later, Judge Harriet Bloom considered all factors before delivering her decision. Citing the violent nature of the crime balanced against Gregory's lack of prior criminal history and the unique circumstances of the case, she sentenced him to 12 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 8 years. As Gregory was led away in handcuffs, the full weight of the tragedy seemed to descend upon the courtroom. There were no victors here, only lives irrevocably altered by a moment of passion and a split second of violence. In the months that followed, Pinecrest Hills struggled to return to normalcy. Vanessa, unable to rebuild her life in a community that now saw her as a pariah, eventually moved out of state, hoping to start anew. The luxury home where Julian died, now notorious, sat unsold on the market, a grim reminder of the events that had transpired. The case left an indelible mark on all involved. Detective Simmons, haunted by the tragic outcome, redoubled her efforts to address domestic disputes before they escalated to violence. Meredith Walker, burdened by guilt, left the real estate business and dedicated herself to counseling couples in crisis. As for Gregory, he began serving his sentence, his once promising medical career in ruins. In a final ironic twist, he found himself assigned to work in the prison infirmary, his medical skills now serving a population far removed from the affluent patients of Pinecrest Hills. The tragedy served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that beneath the polished veneer of even the most seemingly perfect lives, hidden currents of discontent and desire can lead to devastating consequences. In Pinecrest Hills and beyond, the story of the Carlyles and Julian Frost would be remembered as a modern-day morality tale, a testament to the destructive power of secrets, lies, and unchecked passion.